Let's understand everything about mark dirty. Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. In previous episode, you noticed that I did call the update method on my library, and I told you that inside the update method, we have this mark dirty. And the question was that what is the responsibility of this mark dirty? Although I touched it briefly, but in this video, we will talk about it in depth so that you understand when you need to mark something dirty in Minecraft. Mark dirty is a method that comes from block entity. Inside block entity, we have this code. Well, of course, we check if the word is not null, we are calling another overload of ourselves as mark dirty. This one sets that, hey, the word itself is marked dirty for this position and then updates comparators for the position. Well, this thing makes sense just by reading it. It's updating the comparators and the block maybe. But let's go into this mark dirty on the word class. Now, word marked dirty is saying that, hey, if the chunk of this position is loaded, get that chunk and make that chunk as needs saving. It goes into the word chunk and it says, hey, we need to save ourselves. So first of all, check if we need saving, then call the needs save, and finally this.unsaved listeners set unsaved on this position. First of all, let's look at this needs saving. It returns if the chunk needs saving already, and then it calls the super on the chunk to make it needs saving. Now, if the chunk was not needing save before, now it's marked to be saved, and then we are adding it to the unsaved for this blog post. Let's take a look. Set unsaved is an interface. So if you want to make sure that you follow the logic, you can take a look at the implementations of this method inside Minecraft and follow forward. But long story short, the thing is that when you mark a block entity as dirty, you are sending a block position to the world, and the world will find its chunk and will flag the whole chunk to be saved again on hard drive using NBT data, meaning that you effectively writing the new information of this block entity in the world. Now, here's a question. Why did the world check if the chunk was not marked to be saved before? Because we may have more than one block entity in a single chunk, and maybe at the same tick or in a gap between the saving and the new save, more than one block entity marked themselves dirty. At this point, we told the world that, hey, this chunk needs to be saved maybe 3 times, 4 times, who knows? And we shouldn't save that chunk over and over and over again and again and again in one single save. We just need to save it once. Because of that, we are checking that, hey, if we are marked as needs to be saved, then okay, we already added it to a list. And at that point, we are okay. If we didn't add this chunk to be saved, okay, now we add it. And that's it. That's the mark dirty in a nutshell. Now, here's a question. On a block entity, then we should set ourselves as dirty if a block entity contains some data. For example, in our example, lava eating goo had a custom data as a block position. This custom data falls into 2 different categories. The first category is that a data that we never care to save and load. We are generating it and then dumping it. We don't care about the previous values. Well, we don't need to save that. But in this particular case, we need to save the original position that we started our move, and we want to track it. So we need to save this data to hard drive. Every time we need to track a data. The moment we change that data, we immediately call the mark dirty. Now, here we have an alias called update. The update is doing the mark dirty for us. But eventually, we are marking the block entity and the chunk as dirty. So here is the golden key. Any time that you change a value that needs to be saved and tracked between a game save and a game load, and you're changing it inside a tick or at any other place, you need to set yourself as dirty. Let me give you a few different examples. You have a fluid tank. As long as the amount of fluid and the type of the fluid in the tank is unchanged, you don't care. The moment you add a bucket of fluid in or take a bucket of fluid out, meaning that you change the amount of fluid, you want to track that amount of fluid between the game save and game load. and you had changed it already, so you need to mark yourself dirty. You have an empty fluid tank. As long as it's empty, you don't need to do anything. But as soon as you add a single bucket of lava in it, now the content is changed and you need to track this content between a game save and game load. So now you need to mark yourself dirty. A battery block using energy. As long as there is no output, there is no input, and the battery is empty, so be it. The moment you add 1 unit of energy into the battery, you need to track it between the game save and game load, so you mark yourself dirty. The moment you take 1 unit of energy out, you need to track this between the game save and game load, so you need to mark yourself dirty. Another example is when you break a block that is related to a block entity. Now, in this particular case, thankfully, Minecraft is handling it behind the scenes. It will eventually mark the chunk dirty itself, and you don't need to mark that block entity dirty. However, if you were smart enough, in previous video, when I put a marker on the right NBT and started the debug mode, the moment I put the block on the ground, we hit this breakpoint and the game stopped. I didn't mark anything dirty, but Minecraft did. Minecraft did mark the chunk as dirty. It means that now the chunk wants to save itself, and of course it doesn't happen immediately, but it is asking, hey, what do I need to write for this new block? Give me information. This is the right NBT's job, okay? And the moment we load the game, of course, we read those data. It's irrelevant to mark dirty, but as long as we didn't mark ourselves dirty, we wouldn't put this data in the NBT, so we didn't follow the logic on the read. Do we need to mark ourselves dirty in constructors? Normally, you don't need to. As you see, I'm changing this value in the constructor, and I'm not marking myself dirty because a block entity's constructor normally happens when you set a block in the word, being it manually as a player or set block state in this case. At both times, the constructor will happen and then it will immediately call the right NBT by Minecraft magic, so you don't need to handle the mark dirty here. We have few exceptions for this. If you don't pay attention what you are doing, you may confuse it, and it's especially happening in the fluid containers and energy containers. We will talk about them later. Now, what is the logical point of having a mark dirty? Normally, it happens in tick methods, because in a block entity, variable value change happens during the tick logic. So in your tick logic, at some point, you may want to mark the block entity dirty. Now, normally, I would do this. I would put a curly brace and say that, hey, be.mark dirty means that I'm marking the block entity as dirty. However, I did a little bit of sneaky code and moved that mark into the same place that I'm changing the value. And the only time that I'm calling the set origin is during the tick logic. So it's exactly the same thing, but a little bit of personal code design, if you may ask. And that's it. So if you are changing the amount of energy, fluid, the type of fluid, or if the content of an inventory, for example, a chest, the content is changed, yes, you are changing a list of items behind the scene. So yes, you need to mark yourself dirty. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.